Hi, Dave Sobel, host of the Business of Tech podcast here at the Acronis CyberFit Summit in Miami. I'm hanging out with Paul Redding with the Compliancy Group. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me, Dave. Really appreciate it.
So let's kind of dive right in to some of the meat of this. Talk to me a little bit about what kind of a typical compliancy practice looks like in an IT provider.
Well, scary fact is, Dave, for most IT providers, it's a little bit of a mess. The problem in our community is that when I say compliance or you say compliance, the typical IT provider is thinking cybersecurity tools. So they go back into their stack, they rearrange the stack, they look at backup, disaster recovery, and endpoint protection, but they're not building out a compliance program in their organization. A compliance program, and to say this all the time, compliance is a tax ID issue. It starts where your business sits and involves everybody inside. A well-built program means that from the CEO down to the help desk tech, everybody buys in, everybody's involved in compliance on a daily basis, everybody's trained, and you all understand what it takes. It's pretty rare, unfortunately.
So what you're sort of saying is they're trying to solve a people problem with tools.
Well said. Well said. We throw tools at this situation. We go, look, we protected you from a breach. Reality is the breach most of the time comes from a human being doing something stupid. I equate it to like the vampire in the old movies, right? So you can put garlic on the windows and crosses on the door, but if I invite the vampire in for dinner, I'm dessert. There's nothing I can do.
So compliancy means a lot of different things in different industries, right? I mean, walk me through what it kind of like a difference between two industries at a high level, just to get a sense of it.
Well, obviously we were born in the Hipaa compliance world, right? So for healthcare and Hipaa compliance, it's based around what you do in terms of patient treatments and all the medical records associated with it. So it's targeted with a very specific data set. However, other types of compliance, so fintech, for example, or SOX compliance, if you're publicly traded, is really based on what you are as an organization. It's not, I have sensitive data. It's you work in this industry, your organization falls into this category, therefore it's a thing you must deal with. The one that we're seeing a huge emergence of right now is Department of Defense compliance. All these manufacturers in various walks of life, from very, very small to relatively large, have suddenly found out compliance is focused on you too. It's a big wake-up call for them. So it's coming from most sectors that are touching sensitive data.
Which is most sectors right now. So I'm going to throw out a theory that I've posited on my show, and I want you to tell me if I'm right, if I'm wrong, where you fall on this. I'm advocating that I think just about every IT service provider out there right now needs a role dedicated to understanding regulation and law for their both locale and industry. Am I right or am I wrong on that?
I think you're ambitious. I think that the idea is right in that you as an organization have to first understand your own compliance requirements, the laws it applies to what you're doing, and that's shifting under your feet every day, right? Where you're ambitious is assuming that the MSP community has people like that they can hire. One of the biggest challenges for this community right now is, I don't think it's anybody's secret, it's a lack of staff, it's a lack of personnel. What I believe is that there are organizations, I kind of pointed ourselves as one of them, obviously self-serving, but the reality is there are organizations and groups that can work with you and kind of fill that gap. The same way you as an MSP provide a virtual CIO, you can also use a virtual compliance officer. And I say take us and the Hipaa thing out of it. I've worked with groups, especially when I was an MSP in the Department of Defense supply chain sector, where you go find a risk analyst or somebody that has the chops that your team doesn't necessarily, and get them to build your program for you. I agree it's critical to have that inside, but I just don't see a whole ton of people sitting around waiting for the MSP community to suck them up and make them that compliance officer. You know what I mean?
So that's totally fair, but I will also say that every time I look at things and say that's hard, I immediately go to, and that's where the money is. If it's hard, it implies that. So knowing that this is an area that is difficult, what's kind of usually that first step for somebody who is saying, all right, I need to wrestle this to the ground? What's a good first step?
Well, all compliance starts with a risk assessment. And you've got the Hipaa risk assessment or the NIST or whatever. Take the framework out of it. It really doesn't matter. A risk assessment as a concept is taking a look at your organization, figuring out all the ways that you can be hurt, negatively affected, the things that are putting your organization, quote unquote, at risk, and identifying those and trying to remediate them. That's no matter what you do. If you're an MSP service provider out there, you do risk assessments for your client. When is the last time you actually did one for you? That's a really important thing. So that's where it all starts.
Paul, thanks for talking to me today.
Absolutely, man. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to see you again in person. It's been too long.